Hi friends, welcome to GMATPoint. I'm Prakhar Jain, and today I want to talk about a study plan that you should use if you're preparing for round 1 applications for ISB that are ending in September. These days I get a lot of students asking me the same question that okay, I'm applying for ISB in round 1. How should I plan my study for the next 2 months? So that's why we've decided to make a dedicated video for it. So let's get started. So how first we should look at how much time we actually have. How and that will decide how we should plan out a study. So most students they tend to think that okay, we have till 20th September. That's my deadline for the application. So I have till 20th September to give the exam. But that's not actually true. Your application is not just going to be a GMAT exam, right? There are going to be essays. There is going to be other documentation like your or your previous education. There's that. And also ideally you would want to review your application before you send it, right? Let's say you have a consultant of some sorts or you want someone else to go over it, then you would want to review that. So these three steps will also take some time. It's not going to be that okay, if you give your exam very close to the deadline and then have no time left for this, then even a good score won't be worth it because your application won't actually convert. So that's why you should leave some time for it. I would suggest that you should have a tentative GMAT date for the 10th of September. That gives you around 9 to 10 days. And in those days, you can spend time writing your essays, you can spend time preparing your documentation, and you can spend time reviewing your application before actually sending it through. Now, today, the day of recording is the 13th of July. So I'll be referring this as our starting date, which means we have a total time of 8 weeks. 8 weeks is just about enough time for you to actually give a good attempt for GMAT. Now, irrespective of how long you're going to prepare for, in this case it is 8 weeks, but even if it was an entire year, the first step is always to diagnose. So think of it like going to a doctor, right? When you go to a doctor, the first thing they do is they conduct tests to do a diagnosis that okay, this is wrong, this is what's wrong with the person, and then they prescribe accordingly. So similarly, for your preparation, what you do is you do a test, you do a full length mock test to diagnose what your problems are, what exactly it is that you need to fix, and only then basically depending on the results of the test you plan out your study. So let's look at the three sections. So for the first section, let's look at quant. So in terms of quant, it is fairly simple to diagnose, right? You have certain strengths and you have certain weaknesses. You might be strong at arithmetic, you might be weak at algebra, you might be strong at statistics, and you might be weak at, let's say, word problems, right? So in terms of quant, you diagnose your strengths and weaknesses that okay, these topics I'm very strong at, these topics I'm very weak at. The third thing I want you to diagnose is accuracy. Like let's say you attempt 5 questions in arithmetic and you get 3 of them right and 2 of them wrong, so that's a 60% accuracy. That means your arithmetic is decent but it's not very strong. You look at the topic wise accuracy to actually be able to rank your strengths properly. So for example, let's say in arithmetic, right? You have, let's say you get 3 out of 5 questions right. Now that is a 60% accuracy. In terms of algebra, let's say you get 2 out of 2 questions right. That's 100% accuracy. So you can't just look at how many questions you got right. You need to actually look at the accuracy as well. In this case, algebra would be your strongest point, and arithmetic would be somewhere in the middle, somewhere in between a strength and a weakness. Right. The third thing I want you to look at is time management. So, are you able to finish the section or not? Are you spending too much time on one question? We'll also look at this in a later slide. In verbal, because there are only 2 types of questions, there is either reading comprehension or there is critical reasoning. So you look at those accuracies. That okay, this is my accuracy in RCs and this is my accuracy in CRs. In this case, the strength and weaknesses are between just these two. It's really just the order of the two. In terms of verbal, the third thing I want you to look at is reading ability. Now, reading ability is a bit of an umbrella term, but what I mean by that is how quickly you are able to read an RC and gauge what it's talking about and actually be able to tell that, okay, this is where I will find the answer for a particular question, right? In terms of RCs, it's not really about that you have to understand the entire RC. It's about whether or not you can answer the questions that are asked about that RC, right? So you should be able to read the RC quickly enough, or at least be able to gauge that, okay, this is the part of this RC that has been discussed in so and so paragraph. So let's say you have an RC that is 3 paragraphs, right? You should be able to tell that, okay, this might be the intro, and let's say the author is going against some sort of some sort of notion, right? Let's say the author wants to deny some existing notion. So this might be the intro to the notion, this might be the criticism, and this might be the conclusion, right? This could be the structure. So you should reading ability is basically that you should be able to tell which paragraph is serving what function, so that when you go to the questions, you can immediately go to that paragraph and find the answer. That's what reading ability is. The third one is obviously time management. How long you are spending on CR questions, how long you are spending on RC questions, and from there on, we'll prescribe for the verbal section. In terms of DI, the diagnosis looks a little different. So in DI, as far as the particular concepts themselves go, there are either going to be math-based questions or non-math-based questions. Math-based questions, again, the strengths and the weaknesses would be the existing ones. And the same goes for non-math questions. You are probably going to get CR-based questions, right? So you could get critical reasoning-based data sufficiency questions or critical reasoning-based MSR questions. So topic wise, they are similar to these two, but in DI you have 5 different types of questions. Now let's move on to the DI section. In DI section, in terms of concepts, there isn't particularly anything new that is different from quant and verbal. You're either going to get math-based questions or non-math-based questions. Non-math-based questions are usually CR accuracy, or rather CR-based questions, right? In terms of math-based questions, your existing strengths in quant are going to be your strengths in those. Your existing weaknesses in quant are going to be the weaknesses in math-based DI questions. Right? But in DI, you have a lot of different types of questions. You have data sufficiency, multi-source, two-part analysis, and graphs and table-based questions. So in terms of diagnosing what is weak in DI, it's more about the type of question you're getting wrong. So let's say you are spending a lot of time and you are getting wrong in terms of data sufficiency questions. So that's how you know that, okay, I need to practice a lot of data sufficiency questions. Or let's say you are spending a lot of time and still getting them wrong in, let's say, graphs and table based questions. You should spend a lot of time on graphs and table based questions when you're planning your study out. So that's what the diagnosing stage is about. This is just the first step of your preparation, which is figuring out what exactly your weak points are and what exactly needs work and how much work. Okay. Now let's look at your actual preparation timeline and what that should look like. So we saw that we have 8 weeks. So the first 4 weeks, I want you to spend fixing all your sectional concepts. Now these sectional concepts will be the ones that you diagnosed over here. So let's say, for example, in quant, let's say you diagnosed that algebra was weak. So I want you to spend the first 4 weeks going over some algebra. But obviously, algebra is not going to be your only weak point. So let's say you have algebra that is weak. Let's say you have probability that is weak. In verbal, let's say your CR is weak. So I want you to spend a lot of time working on these two. In DI, let's say your two-part analysis is weak. So you should spend a lot of time. The first 4 weeks, you should spend covering these 4 topics because these are your weakest points, right? So you spend most of the time here. That's basically half your time, right? And in this time, I also want you to give one mock weekly and also analyze it. We'll look at how to analyze a mock later in the video, but that is basically the plan for the first 4 weeks. Familiarity with question types. This is again for the DI section. So sectional concepts for verbal and quant, familiarity with question types for DI, right? Now, the next 3 weeks, after the first 3 weeks, basically 10th of August onwards, the next 3 weeks, you practice a lot. And this is not just going to be your weak topics, right? This is going to be all topics. You practice and practice more and more questions. So, for example, if algebra was weak, you spend the first 4 weeks reviewing some algebra, learning some algebra, doing some practice questions, and actually getting better at it. In the next 3 weeks, you're not learning anything new per se, but you're spending a lot of time solving questions. You're getting better at not just understanding the concept, you're getting better at actually solving the questions in a limited time frame, right? And you also spend the next 3 weeks with a lot of sectional focus. What this basically means is you work on your weakest section now. So, up until now, what we were doing was that we were fixing every particular section separately. Now, the next 3 weeks are spent fixing the entire exam. So you spend a lot of time focusing on one section. So let's say DI section is your weakest one. So what that means is now you spend more time on DI and lesser time on quant and verbal. So let's say if you're studying, let's say 6 hours a day, right? You might spend, let's say, 4 hours on DI and let's say 1 and 1 on quant and verbal. Or let's say you might spend 3 hours on DI and then 1.5 and 1.5 on quant and verbal, right? So you would break down your time based on whichever your weakest one is. That's what we mean by bottleneck improvement. The word bottleneck is basically whatever your weakest section is, you try to push that further. And the reason behind that is, let's say you're getting an 83 in quant, right? Let's say in quant you're getting an 83, let's say in verbal you're getting an 82, but in DI you're getting a 75, right? Now, what this means is that, let's say you were to work on your quant section, right? Even if you get that perfect, the most amount of points you could get is 7. The most you could get is 7 because the highest score is 90. Let's say you start working in verbal, the most growth you could get is 8 points, right? But in DI, there are 15 points remaining on the table. There are still 15 points remaining on the table. What this means is that spending time in DI will lead to a higher score improvement than spending time in these two. That's what we mean by bottleneck improvement. You move your lowest scoring section higher and higher, right? And during this stage also, I want you to do one mock weekly. Again, we'll look at how to analyze it later. And the last week, which is arguably one of the most important weeks, you give 3 mocks in the last week. Now, when I say 3 mocks, none of these have to be 2 days before the exam. So let's say if you're giving it on 10th of September, the actual GMAT, I don't want you to give any mocks on 8th or 9th. These 3 mocks have to be between these 3 mocks have to be between 1st to 7th. The reason I don't want you to give any 2 mocks and any mocks in the last 2 days is because there is nothing good that can actually come out of it. Right? If you get a great score, then you might walk into the exam with a lot of confidence. That could actually hurt you if you're overconfident. If you get a horrible score, then you might actually walk into the exam with very low confidence. So neither of those outcomes is great. And also, in the last 2 days, giving one mock isn't actually going to help you that much. So you're risking a lot for a very small potential reward. So I don't want you doing that. I don't want you to give any mocks on the 8th and 9th. Give 3 mocks in the last 10 days and plan them between 1st to the 7th, right? These 3 mocks, I want you to seriously analyze though. I don't want you to spend time doing any new concepts or any of that. I want you to spend all your time seriously analyzing these mocks. Any mistakes that you find, spend a lot of time fixing them. So, for example, let's say you had a quant question where you could have got that question wrong if it wasn't for a silly mistake. I want you to really review that mistake. Solve that question 2 times, 3 times, or find questions where there are similar questions and the tendency to make that same mistake will be appearing again and again. So I want you to try those questions. So you focus a lot on these 3 mock attempts. No changes. I don't want you to change your strategy in the last 10 days of the exam or the last 10 days before the exam. Basically, let's say you are getting 655 in your mocks consistently up until the exam, right? Now you might think that, okay, and let's say your 655 breakdown looks something like this. Basically, 2 sections, much better than the third section. So now you might think that, okay, let me change my strategy a little bit. Let me try and focus a lot more on DI in my actual exam. Now, you are again risking a lot. You know that you now have an approach that gets you a 655. In the process of trying something new for the exam, you might think that, okay, this might take me to a 705. But if you're trying something new, this could also take you down to a 605, right? So in the last 10 days, you don't change anything. You stick to what has worked for you and you simply repeat that in the exam. I don't want you to try anything new either in the exam or in the 10 days leading up to the exam. And also exam day preparation. So you look at what center it is, how far it is, and all of the logistical basically aspects of actually going and giving the exam, how you're going to travel to the exam, what you're going to carry, what time slot you have. Basically, not exactly exam preparation, but more sort of preparing for actually going and giving the exam. Right. Now, let's look at the importance of various topics, right? So, in terms of quants, let's say arithmetic and algebra were strong for you. This means that now the most amount of focus that you could get is by focusing, the most amount of growth that you could get is by focusing on these two because these two will have a higher weightage, right? Let's say your weakest concepts were, let's say your strongest concepts were algebra and statistics. This means that you should spend time focusing on arithmetic and number properties. The stage of preparation that this is for is this one over here. So basically, all weak sectional concepts you were covering in the first 4 weeks. So in the first 4 weeks, if your algebra and stats and probability are strong, I want you to spend time focusing on arithmetic and number properties, because these are the ones that will get you the most amount of results. Let's say you're very good in quant, right? Let's say you're very good in quant, and you have these three sections as strong ones, and the remaining three as weak ones. So then I want you to spend time on these three, but obviously it would be proportional. So this has a higher weightage, so more time on this, a little less time on this, and very little time on this. Not that I don't want you to focus on this, but comparatively, your effort should be more focused on this, because that will get you a higher result. A 10% weightage or a 15% weightage is 2 to 3 questions, whereas a 2 to 3% weightage is one question max, right? So that's how you structure your preparation in terms of fixing your sectional, in terms of fixing your conceptual weaknesses. In terms of DI, the analysis looks a little different compared to quant. Now, for example, here we can see that graphs and table-based questions are only, like graphs is 20 to 30%, but tables is 10 to 20%. I actually want you to spend most amount of time on these, because these will actually show up in multi-source reasoning questions as well. In multi-source reasoning, you might have 3 to 4 tabs. One might be a table, another might be a graph. So, in the process of fixing graphics interpretation questions and table analysis questions, you are actually going to be working towards MSR questions as well. So, these two topics, I want you to focus every day on these. We'll look at how to do that in a later slide. But these two topics I wanted to focus a lot on. And now let's say your data sufficiency is weak, so that is weak. And let's say your multi-source reasoning is strong and your graphs is strong, right? Then obviously similar to quant, I want you to spend a lot of time fixing this, because this is going to bring you the most amount of results, rather than working on two-part analysis. Because two-part analysis, you'll get a lower number of questions as compared to data sufficiency. So this is going to bring you a much better return for your time investment as compared to two-part analysis. Now, same goes for verbal. In verbal, the weightage isn't that different for the two. It is say 60-40 instead of 50-50. In this case, it is fairly straightforward. If you're good at this, practice this. If you're good at this, then practice this. So in terms of verbal, it's fairly straightforward. Right? Now, let's look at how exactly you should analyze a mock. What I mean when I say analyze a mock. So all of us obviously understand that in terms of analyzing a mock, you look at the questions you got wrong, you try them again. Sometimes you get them right, sometimes you get them wrong. That's about analyzing the conceptual part of it. But there's a huge aspect of the exam, which is the time management analysis. Basically, mocks are more than just concepts, right? It also tells you how your time management is. Now, this is a report that you can use from GMATPoint mocks. You can use this report, and you should use the time spent per question data. So this is an example report from a particular student. The first thing, for example, if I was analyzing this report, the first thing I would see is, did they finish the section? I can see they did not finish the section. There are 2 skipped questions, right? This means that their average time spent must have been really high, and that is true. The average time spent is 2.2 minutes. That is fairly high, right? Another thing I will see is how much time they spent on on the questions that they spent a lot of time on. So 2.2 minutes being the average time is actually not that bad on its own. But what's really bad is that this question, for example, had almost 4 minutes on it. Another question with almost 4 minutes. This is with more than 3 minutes. More than 3 minutes. Or just around 3 minutes. This one is also probably around 3 minutes. So I can see that the variance is really high. The fastest questions, for example, this one was, let's say, 1.5 minutes. And the frequency of faster questions is also really low. So the questions that you spend a lot of time on, there are a lot more questions with more than 3 minutes. The times that you spend lower time on, there are fewer of them, and also the difference is much smaller. So this tells me that the time management is very poor. Another very important factor is that if you look at the most time spent questions, so the questions that took the most time, they're actually all wrong. So all that time didn't even bring them the correct question. This means that they shouldn't have, they might as well have just not spent all that time, got them wrong anyway, and moved on, right? If this person, let's say, instead of spending 3+ minutes on these questions, had just spent 2 minutes on all of these, right? Let's say just spent 2 minutes on all of these, and then saved the time to get these two right instead of actually running out of time, then that would have gotten them a better score. So this tells me, first, if these questions are similar, let's say these are all two-part analysis questions, or let's say these are two-part analysis and data sufficiency questions, that tells me that TPA and DS are major weak points. Why do I call them major weak points? Because you're spending a lot of time and you're getting them wrong, right? Now let's look at the other one. The other ones that they got wrong. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. These are ones that they did not spend a lot of time on, but they still got them wrong. So let's say these are multi-source reasoning questions, for example, right? So this is going to be a weak point, but not as major as these two. So this is going to be a weak point, right? And now let's look at the third one. Let's say the questions they got right are now going to be all graphs and tables. Graphs and tables. So this is their strong point, because they are able to finish these questions in not a lot of time and they are able to get them right. So this is their strong point. So when they actually plan out their study, their study for the next 2 months, what they should do is, okay, I'm going to spend a lot of time working on this, some time working on this, and this, because it's my strong point, I won't spend too much time on this, but I'll still just keep revising it. So this is how you can use your time spent per question data, right? This reveals a lot more than just what is strong and what is weak. If I did not have this data, I would have assumed these to be my weak points, but I could not have prioritized them. Now, using the time data, I can actually prioritize them even further. So this is basically like, it refines your data even more. Right. Now let's look at strategic analysis in terms of mock, right? The first thing I want you to do is experiment with sectional orders and strategies. What this means in the GMAT, you can choose the order in which you attempt the sections, right? So some people score better when they do quant first, verbal first, second, and DI last. Someone else might do it when the order is the opposite. Let's say something like this. So when you're giving mocks, I want you to try out all the orders. And the reason I want you to try out all those orders is so that you can figure out which order consistently gets you a higher score. So the reason I want you to try them out instead of just going by what you feel would be a better order is because this can sometimes reveal things about yourself that you might not have even known. So me personally, I like to do quant when I'm fresh. And the reason is not that, okay, I like this, I enjoy the exam more. The reason is that when I was doing Q, DI, and V, my score was higher than versus when I was doing V, DI, and Q in that order. I was consistently getting higher scores with this order than with this order. So that's why I decided that I should give GMAT in this order. So I want you to try out various different orders so that you can figure out which exact order works the best for you. The second thing is look at the holistic sectional strategy. So sometimes we can get fixated on one section, right? Or rather on one question. But you should look at the entire section. And what I mean by that is that sometimes, for example, you might spend 4 minutes doing one question. And even if you get it right, let's say in the process, you have gotten 3 questions that you have not answered because you ran out of time. So this is actually a bad trade-off for you, right? You're getting one question right, but you're skipping out on 3 questions because you spent too much time. Let's say you were able to do this question in 2 minutes, right? Or let's say instead of even doing this in 2 minutes, you were just able to make an educated guess, right? That you thought, okay, I think I can make an educated guess on this because I'm running low on time. And let's say you even got this wrong. But let's say you now come across 3 questions that you actually knew how to answer. So you'll now get 3 correct answers because you'll be able to do them in the time that you are left with. So you should look at the entire section when you're solving it. Let's say you reach the last 4 questions and you have 6 minutes left. So that is not near enough time to do all the questions correct. So instead of actually just going, spending all the time on one question and thinking, okay, let me get one question right, even if I skip the last ones, it would be better if you instead spent 1.5 minutes on each question and just made an educated guess on all of them. Because finishing the section and getting more than one question right would be much better than getting only one question right and then skipping out on the remaining ones. The next thing we'll be looking at is going to be your long-term improvement. So we've looked at study plans, we've looked at when you should plan your exam, we've looked at how you should prepare depending on what stage of your prep you're in. But what we now will look at is the long-term improvement. These are things that you have to do from day one all the way to day before the exam. And this is not going to be specific to you. This is going to be for everyone. So even if someone has all topics strong and is getting very good mock scores and wants to just revise for the next 2 weeks, they should also do this. And someone who's getting not a good score and is preparing for the next 2 months to increase that score should also do this. So this is for everyone. First thing is read an article daily. I want you to read an essay or a news article every single day. Now, this might not immediately improve your score. You might think that, okay, if I read an article for 7 days, how is that going to give me a better mock score on the eighth day? Thing is, it won't. But what it will do is that over the course of 2 months, or rather 8 weeks, over the course of the next 8 weeks, you'll build reading acumen. What I mean by reading acumen is that you'll get better at reading faster without losing grip of the passage. You'll get better at understanding what the tone of the author is. You'll get better at understanding what the position of the author is. So for example, if you're reading a news article, you'll get better at seeing that, okay, the whoever wrote the article, the author of the article, seems to be a little bit more opinionated about this side, or rather seems to be a bit more opinionated about this side. That means you'll over time build the capability or build the intuition to get better at understanding passages. So that will help you build RC and CR both accuracies. The second thing I want you to do is complete daily targets every day. So on GMATPoint, we have daily targets. Basically, before, like similar to how before you go to a gym, or rather before you start working out in the gym, you do a warm up. So similarly, before you do your prep, I want you to do a warm up. The way you do that warm up is using GMATPoint's daily targets. Daily targets is like a bite-sized version of every single section. So, for example, in quants, in the quant daily target, you will have, let's say, 3 to 5 questions that are just to get your prep started. So if you do those 3 to 5 questions, your mind is now warmed up, ready to ready to go for the intense study session you're about to have next. And daily targets also, another thing it does is that, let's say your weakest point is verbal, right? So you're going to obviously focus a lot of time on verbal. But in the process, I don't want you to lose out on quant because you're completely ignoring it. So daily targets make sure that you're doing at least some of your, at least some preparation on your weak points as well. That way you won't, some preparation on your strong points as well. That way you won't lose track of them. So again, similar to the example, if verbal was weak and you're spending a lot of time on verbal, I don't want you to sideline quant. The way to make sure that you're not sidelining quant and in the background it's getting weaker, you do daily targets. The third thing I want you to do is cover one chart from the visual library every day. So on GMATPoint, we have the data insights visual library. We have 40 charts on it, which are all GMAT relevant. And you have 8 weeks, so that's 56 days. You have 40 charts in 8 weeks. That's very doable. I want you to go over one chart every single day. And when I say go over the chart, I want you to use the interactive feature. I want you to solve the example question. I want you to solve the similar questions. I want you to go over reading tips. Use the AI feature. Uh, Spend some time seeing that, okay, this is how I could have spotted, let's say, a maximum much faster. So again, for an example, let's say you're studying bar charts on Monday, right? Let's say you have a bar chart that looks something like this. And let's say your bar charts were weak up until now. So you studied the bar chart, you solved the question. Now I want you to spend some time that, okay, if I had a maximum based question, actually I don't need to calculate. I can just see which one is the tallest bar and that would be my maximum. Or rather, which one is my shortest bar and that would be my minimum. So insights like these are the ones that you develop when you read charts every day. So I want you to build chart fluency. This helps you. This helps you understand what a graph is saying very quickly and very accurately. So this will be relevant for graph-based questions And because graphs appear in MSR questions, this will also be helpful for MSR questions. You'll be able to quickly understand what a graph is trying to show you. You'll be able to actually understand that, okay, if there's a question based on, okay, which, let's say it's a maximum or minimum question, right? Because you have studied bar charts, you will know that you don't actually need to get the readings for all of the bars. You can just look at the tallest bar and that will be your maximum. The shortest bar will be your minimum. So I wanted to spend a lot of time on the visual library as well. That's it for today, guys. There will be a link to a formula PDF and our full course down in the description. And for more such informative and GMAT related content, subscribe to GMATPoint.